Number 3. Mark Hobson. Mark Hobson was born in Wakefield, England in September 1969. By most accounts, he had a happy and stable childhood. His father was a coal miner and his mother was a machinist. He had 2 sisters. While everything seemed normal at home, Hobson started to show violent tendencies as a teenager. When he was 16, he was working at a butcher shop. One day he blew up and threatened one of his co-workers with a boning knife. When he was 21, Hobson moved in with his girlfriend and her 2 children. The couple eventually had their own child and then married in 1994. Much like his childhood, his married life seemed normal. He worked at a local power plant and did landscaping on the side. But that idyllic life did not last. On New Year's Day 1999, Hobson unexpectedly walked out on his wife and children. Previously, he didn't drink, but then he got heavily into alcohol and marijuana. He also left his job at the power plant and started working as a bouncer at a nightclub in Selby. While working at the bar, Hobson started taking harder drugs like ecstasy and cocaine. He also became more violent. In 2002, Hobson got into a fight with a friend over a woman and stabbed him 5 times in public. The friend survived the attack and Hobson was arrested. In 2003, Hobson pleaded guilty to the attack and was sentenced to community service. A year later, Hobson got a job as a garbage collector and moved in with his 27-year-old girlfriend, Claire Sanderson, in Campbellsforth. Claire worked at a paper factory. She had problems with alcohol and anorexia. Many people said that their relationship was toxic. The couple physically fought in public, and the police were frequently called to their apartment regarding their fighting. By the summer of 2004, after 18 months together, 34-year-old Hobson realized he wanted to be with Claire's twin sister, Diane Sanderson. He told a coworker he had chosen the wrong sister. On July 11, 2004, Hobson attacked his 27-year-old girlfriend, Claire, in their apartment. He struck her in the head 17 times with a hammer and then strangled her. Once she was dead, Hobson dragged her body to the bathroom and wrapped her up in garbage bags. A week later, Hobson called Diane and told her that her sister, Claire, was sick and she wanted her to visit. When Diane arrived at the apartment, Hobson attacked her. He tortured her with razors and scissors and sexually assaulted her. Her left nipple was bitten off. Eventually, he bludgeoned her with the same hammer that he attacked her sister with and strangled her to death. He also wrapped her body up in garbage bags. He placed her body in the bathroom with the body of her sister. That same day, Diane's boyfriend called her phone and he was surprised when Hobson answered. Hobson told her that Claire and Diane were with their father, who had suffered a heart attack. Hobson suggested to the boyfriend that they should meet for drinks at a bar, and the boyfriend agreed. After the bar, the two returned to Hobson's apartment. The boyfriend noted an awful smell, which was the decomposing bodies, and asked Hobson about the odor. Hobson said that the stench came from the drains. The boyfriend also noticed a bloodstain on the sofa. Hobson said it was Claire's, quote, women problems, unquote. The boyfriend left without realizing that his girlfriend and her twin sister were dead in another room. The next day, July 18th, Hobson fled the area. That same day, Diane's boyfriend was concerned about Claire and Diane's father because of his heart attack. He went to his home and was surprised to find him in good health. But they were now very concerned because why would Hobson lie about that? Specifically, he used that lie to explain why Diane and Claire were not around. So, where were the sisters? They went to Hobson's apartment and discovered he was gone. However, the apartment was left open, so they went inside. They found the dead bodies of the two 27-year-old sisters. They immediately called the police. In the apartment, the police found cannabis, cocaine, and a blood-stained hammer. They also found a to-do list about the murders and a shopping list with items like bags, tie wraps, fly spray, and air fresheners. The police said that the list showed that the murders were premeditated. Forensic analysis showed that Claire, who was killed first, was bludgeoned in the living room and then dragged to the bathroom. Diane had suffered quite a bit more. The police found her legs and arms bound. She had been sexually assaulted with an object, and her left nipple was missing. It was never found, and it's believed that Hobson ate it. Hobson had fled to nearby Strensall. The day after he killed Diane, he broke into the home of James and Joyce Britton. 8-year-old James was a former Spitfire pilot who served in World War II. He was partially deaf and had Parkinson's disease. His wife, 82-year-old Joan, had trouble walking and was partially blind. The couple had been married for 58 years and had 2 daughters. Hobson beat the couple with James's walking stick and then stabbed them. He stabbed Joan so violently that the blade came off the handle. He then fled the home. Neighbors discovered the body shortly after the murders and called the police. After the bodies of Diane and Claire were found, the police started a manhunt for Hobson. At a press conference, the police called Hobson, quote, Britain's most wanted man, unquote. At the time, they had no idea he killed the Britons. He was later connected to their murders because his fingerprints were found at the scene. After 4 days on the run, the police broadcasted a recording of Hobson's mom asking for him to turn himself in. After a week of hiding, Hobson emerged in Shipton by Bendingborough, where he was recognized at a gas station. The attendant noticed him as he bought cigarette papers, matches, and water, and he alerted the police. 20 police officers descended on the area and arrested Hobson. He had been hiding out in a bush behind an upholstery store. He was treated for dehydration and drug and alcohol withdrawal. He did not take responsibility for the murders of the Britons. He said he had been drinking heavily that day and he did not remember his actions. He was charged with 4 counts of murder. In April 2005, Mark Hobson pleaded guilty to all 4 counts. During the sentencing hearing, the prosecution said that Hobson kept a list of other people he intended to kill, such as Claire and Diane's parents and his ex-wife. The judge sentenced Hobson to a whole life order, meaning he'll probably never get out of prison alive. The motive for the 4 murders over the 8 days was never determined. While in prison, Hobson attacked another murderer, Ian Huntley. He poured boiling water on him. Huntley murdered 2 10-year-old girls in 2001. Huntley was burned but survived his injuries. As punishment for the assault, Hobson was held in solitary confinement for 3 months. Then Mark Hobson was transferred to HMP Wakefield, also known as Monster Mansion, where he's still being held today. At the time of this video, Hobson is 54 years old. Number 2. Fred McManus. Fred McManus came from a good home. Born in August 1933 into a well-to-do family in Valley Stream, New York, Fred had an idyllic childhood. Fred, along with his 2 sisters, lived in a nice house. His father, Mose McManus, was a well-paid brewery executive. Many people who knew Fred said he was polite and bright, and he had a tendency to be shy. As a teenager, Fred raised hamsters. He was well liked by children and a popular babysitter. Mose McManus expected his son to follow through in his footsteps as a brewery executive, but the younger McManus shocked his father by enlisting in the Marines when he finished high school. 18-year-old Fred McManus wanted to serve in Korea. Before attending boot camp, he stayed at a relative's vacation home near Rochester, New York. He met a 16-year-old girl named Diana Wegeland. Diana had grown up in foster care. After her parents split up when she was a toddler, they placed her in foster care. For most of her life, she was moved around to different foster homes. Before he left for boot camp, Fred promised to keep in touch with Diana. Fred passed boot camp and was considered a decent marksman. However, to his dismay, military personnel made him an office clerk. When Fred returned home on a 10-day leave, his family noticed he seemed dejected. He and his father argued over his decision to join the Marines. After being home for 2 days, Fred decided to go to Rochester to see Diana Wegeland. He stayed at the local YMCA in Rochester and courted 16-year-old Diana. On the last night of McManus's leave, the couple stayed out past Diana's midnight curfew, and her foster mother threatened to report her to social workers. The young couple decided that they couldn't be apart. They bought 50-cent wedding rings from a five-and-dime store. At a library, they researched U.S. marital law, and they learned that Minnesota was the closest state where 16-year-olds could marry without parental consent. Fred and Diana decided to stop there before starting a new life in California. On March 27, 1953, Fred left Diana at the Rochester YMCA and started hitchhiking while wearing his Marines uniform. He got a ride from William Braverman, a 19-year-old college student. Fred robbed Braverman of $8 and his wristwatch. He shot him in the heart and dumped his body in a gravel pit. Fred took Braverman's car and picked up Diana. Then they started driving westward. They stopped at a small grocery store in Wheaton, Illinois the next day. Fred went inside and demanded all the money from the owner, 56-year-old George Bloomberg. George grabbed Fred just as Fred was pulling out his gun. He shot the 56-year-old man. George's wife, 55-year-old Florence Bloomberg, saw the shooting and screamed. McManus shot her dead as well. He then ran from the store empty-handed. They drove to Dubuque, Iowa, where they ditched Braverman's car. Fred robbed a couple of $8 in their car, but he did not kill them. On March 30th, Fred and Diana arrived in Spring Valley, Minnesota. Fred went into a diner with his gun. He shot the diner owner's wife, 43-year-old Agnes Beeston, and a waitress, 48-year-old Harriet Horseman. This time, he got away with $40. Then, it was time to get married, but they encountered a problem. Reports vary on what happened when they tried to apply for a marriage certificate. Some sources state that when they applied for the marriage certificate, the couple learned that there was a 3-day cooling-off period before certificates were issued. Another report said that the couple was wrong about Minnesota's marriage age, so they were denied the certificate. Nevertheless, the couple, still unwed, drove back to Iowa where they had stolen the car. At this point, the police were on the lookout for the stolen car that was used in the shooting at the diner. On March 31st, 1953, a police officer spotted the car outside of Garvanello, Iowa. He pulled them over and arrested Fred and Diana. In custody, Fred confessed to the 5 murders in 3 states that were committed over 4 days. Altogether, Fred had stolen $58. In 2024, that's $682. Fred told the police that Diana was innocent and had nothing to do with the murders. Fred was asked why he went on his killing spree. He said, quote, "I was in love and needed the money," unquote. He was also remorseless about what he had done. He said, quote, "It don't bother me if I don't know the people. It's just like reading of the death of a man 500 miles away. You don't know him and can't associate any feelings with him," unquote. Fred's father, Mose, rushed to Iowa to see his son. Fred didn't say much to his father when they saw each other. he simply shook his father's hand and gave him a nod. When Mose made a derogatory comment about Diana, Fred lunged at his father and had to be restrained. His father wept after the meeting with his son. After the arrest, the couple was flown back to Rochester. On the flight, the couple seemed undisturbed that they had committed a murder spree. They laughed and played the card game Canasta. Time magazine said they acted as if they were on their honeymoon. Fred McManus was charged with 5 counts of murder. Diana said she was as guilty as Fred, but she was not charged with any crimes. Fred McManus went to trial in September 1953 for the first murder he committed, the killing of 19-year-old William Braverman. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The trial was a media spectacle, and some people treated Fred as a folk hero. He even signed autographs for young women. The trial was about a week long, and the jury deliberated for 26 hours. Fred was found guilty of murder on September 24, 1953. The jury recommended mercy, and he was spared the electric chair. Fred was sentenced to life in prison. Illinois and Minnesota chose not to prosecute him for the pair of murders he committed in each state. Fred McManus served 20 years in prison and was paroled in 1973. His parole ended in 1981. He was never arrested again. Fred McManus died in 1998 at age 64. No record of what happened to Diana Wegelin after the murder spree could be found. Number 1. Jeremy Sly. At 2:41 a.m. on December 19, 1991, a woman in Northport, Florida called 911. But then, the line went dead. They traced the call to the Northport home of 37-year-old Luis Viega and his 30-year-old wife, Donna Pay. The family had moved to Northport from North Carolina after Luis inherited the house from his father. Luis had served in Vietnam. In Northport, he worked as a cook at a healthcare center for retirees. His wife, Donna Pay, was a certified nursing assistant at a nursing home. Donna had 4 children, 13-year-old Ravonda Pay, 11-year-old Billy Ray Hall Jr., 9-year-old Richard Pay, and 8-year-old Jawantis Pay, who all lived at the house. When the police arrived, they found 37-year-old Luis Villegas dead. Ravonda, Billy Ray, and Richard were also dead. They had all been shot multiple times in the head. Jawantis had been shot 7 times, including in the head, and he was taken to the hospital. He ultimately survived his injuries. It appeared that Richard died trying to protect his younger brother, Jawantis. His body was flung over Jawantis' body. The only family member who wasn't injured was Donna Pay. She had managed to grab a cordless phone, got out of the house, and called 911. Donna Pay said the shooters were 2 white men who were wearing ski masks. About 5 hours after the police were called to their home, the police were called again. The caller was a friend of 71-year-old Paul and 60-year-old Rita Stastny, who lived about 3.5 miles from the crime scene. Paul had served in World War II. After the war, he had worked as a carpenter, but he retired a few years earlier. During the war, Rita learned to weld. Afterwards, she taught welding. In Northport, she worked at a local department store and volunteered at a group home for people with mental disabilities. The couple had moved to the area about 10 years earlier from Danbury, Connecticut. The friend had found the married couple shot to death in their Port Charlotte, Florida home. They had been shot multiple times in the head. The couple's dog had also been shot to death. The house had been ransacked and several guns had been stolen. This included 2 rare decorative shotguns that Paul brought home for the war. The police quickly concluded that 1 pair of men was responsible for the killing spree. All the victims were shot multiple times in the head. Also, they had lived in isolated houses where neighbors couldn't see or hear them. The houses were similar in style and color. They also drove similar cars. The police believe that the Stasnys were killed first, then Louise and his stepchildren were killed. They think that the killers would have ransacked Louise's home, but they either saw Donna flee or realized she was gone and decided it was too risky to stay around. The police developed 3 theories regarding motive. The first is that they were just random acts of violence. The killers just picked 2 isolated houses. The second theory was that Louise and his family were the targets, but the killer accidentally broke into the home of the Stasnys and killed them. Once they realized their mistake, they found Louise's home and killed them. The third was that the murderers wanted to kill Louise and his family, then they killed the Stasnys to make it look like it was a random murder spree, instead of a targeted attack against Louise and his family. In 2 of the motives, Louise was the target. They developed a theory as to why someone may have wanted to kill him. He had worked as a correctional officer in New Jersey and Florida. He was once accused of abusing an inmate. The police thought he may have been killed as retribution for something he did as a correctional officer. An FBI profiler believed that they were juveniles who wanted to ransack houses and not leave any witnesses behind. No arrests were made in the case, and they went cold. After the murders, Donna, an early surviving child, Jawantis, moved back into the home where the massacre happened. Donna said it was hard, but they had no other choice. Jawantis recovered from the shooting and went on to play high school football. 11 years after the deadly shootings, there was a break in the case. A 32-year-old man serving a life sentence in Florida, Jeremy Bruce Sly, confessed to the murders. Sly had a difficult upbringing. He has a twin brother, James. When they were just a year old, their father died of leukemia. Their mother remarried, but Jeremy did not get along with his stepfather. Jeremy was a hyperactive kid who was later diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He lost his mother to throat cancer when he was 13. He took her death hard. He and his brother were put into foster care where they felt ignored. Jeremy ran away several times, leading to him being put in a group home for runaways. He also tried to take his life several times. He and his twin brother, James, started their life of crime by stealing money from their foster parents. In their late teens, they started to abuse alcohol and crack cocaine. They also robbed street dealers. In their early 20s, Jeremy and James started breaking into houses. That was what they were doing on the night of November 13th, 1991. The twins and another man, 19-year-old Ronald Garman, broke into a home in East Naples, Florida. Jeremy was in a bedroom where 44-year-old Geneva Musgraves was sleeping. Geneva was from North Carolina and had arrived in East Naples 2 days earlier. She was staying at her friend's home where the trio had broken into. Jeremy said that she startled him, so he beat her to death with a baseball bat. This murder was committed about 5 weeks before Luis Vega, his stepchildren, and the Stasnys were killed. Jeremy, James, Ronald Garman, and the getaway driver were arrested 11 months later in October 1992. The police had received a tip that Jeremy was the killer, so they questioned him, and he confessed to the murder. Jeremy pleaded no contest to first-degree murder, and James and Garman pleaded no contest to second-degree murder. Jeremy and James were sentenced to life in prison. Garman was sentenced to 27 years in prison. He was paroled in 2004 after serving about 12 years. The getaway driver got probation. In December 2002, while in prison, Jeremy Sly told the police he had shot the 6 people himself. He said he would give a sworn statement, but he had a demand. He wanted to be transferred to a prison where he could enroll in an education program. He was in the Dade County prison system where there was no educational programs. He said he wanted to do something constructive with his time. He had been trying in vain for years to get his GED. The police thought that Jeremy might be telling the truth. but they had problems with his confession. First, he claimed he acted alone, but Donna remembered two men. When Jeremy killed Geneva Musgraves 5 weeks before, his twin brother, James, and another man, Ronald Garman, were with him. But Jeremy was adamant they had nothing to do with the shootings, and he had killed all 6 people with 4 handguns. He said that he disposed of the 4 handguns after the murders. The other problem is that Jeremy wanted something in exchange for confessing. He could have simply been lying to get what he wanted. For years, the police investigated Jeremy's lie to see if it was possible that he committed the murders. In 2007, the police felt they had enough evidence, so they charged Jeremy with the murders. In December 2011, in exchange for not seeking the death penalty, Jeremy pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder in the killing of the Stasnys. In the other 4 murders, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences. Jeremy never gave a motive for the murders. He just said he was out of his mind because he was high, drunk, and he wasn't taking his medication for his bipolar disorder. In 2010, Jeremy was in jail with an educational program, and he got his GED. He said it was his greatest accomplishment. In 2013, he was transferred to the Tomoka Correctional Institution in Daytona Beach, Florida. While in prison, Jeremy found religion. He got a bachelor's degree in Christian education. He then became a certified inmate teacher's assistant and now helps fellow inmates with their education. At the time of this recording, 54-year-old Jeremy Sly is serving his sentence at the Tomoka Correctional Institution. No one else has ever been charged with the murders, but the police are sure there was at least one other shooter. Jeremy's twin brother, James, who was an accomplice in the murder of Geneva Musgraves, is still serving his life sentence. He's incarcerated at the Sumter Correctional Institution in Bushnell, Florida. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed. There's a link on the screen now, and there's a link in the description box below this video. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.